Today we're going to sequence an application with Microsoft AppV 5. But before we begin, we need to just check the settings that the sequencer will use during the sequencing process. On the Tools menu, you will find the options. And the most important item here is on the Exclusion Items tab. Any of the items listed here will not be captured as part of the sequencing process. Most of this makes perfect sense. You would not necessarily want to capture the user's profile as part of your sequence. But if you do get messages during the sequencing process that say files have not been captured and you would like to include those files, come in here, delete the appropriate item, and then resequence the application. So I'm going to click Create a new virtual application package, and that will begin the sequencing process. On the packaging method screen, we have two options. Either create a package using the default method, which is what we will be doing, or create a package using a package accelerator. A package accelerator is simply a sequenced application, but with all of the files and all of the registry values removed. The idea is that a packager can produce a package accelerator and make it available to other packagers, and they will need to install their application in exactly the same way as the first packager, and then can compile that into a sequenced application. The idea is that they will be able to use a pre-tested sequence without necessarily going through complicated setup routines. An internet search will find several sites where package accelerators can be downloaded for most of the common applications. We don't have a package accelerator, so we're just going to use the create package in the default method. On the Prepare Computer screen, the sequencer displays information that it thinks might affect the way that the sequencer will perform. In this case, it's found that Windows Search is active and other applications are running. If I stop the Windows Search and then rerun the test, that item is removed from the list. The other applications are my video recording software, so I can't stop those at the moment. After fixing all of the items on the list, click Next. There are three different sequencing methods that can be used by the sequencer: standard application, add-in, or middleware, and the process for performing each one is almost identical. A standard application, as its name implies, is for the majority of applications. An add-on or plugin is something that extends the functionality of Microsoft Office or Internet Explorer, for instance. Middleware would be something like an SQL client or an Oracle client that would be used by other applications. We're just going to use the standard application. On the Select Installer screen, we put in details of the setup routine that will be used to perform the installation. Performing a custom installation will do exactly the same as selecting the installer for the application, but the installation itself will not start automatically. On the package name screen, we enter details for the application. And the primary virtual application directory. Setting the primary virtual application directory is one of the most important settings that will be used as part of the sequencing process. Any files or folders that are installed as part of the installation process that go into the location you enter here will go into the root of the AppV application. Any files or folders that are installed outside of this location will go into the virtual file system. As the root and virtual file system are treated completely differently by the AppV client, setting which location to use is quite an important detail. By default, all users will have full write access to files and folders that are stored within the root of the virtual application, and any files that are stored within the virtual file system will inherit the rights that are present on the physical file system. And so in most cases that's read-only. It's also possible to merge files and folders that are stored within the virtual file system with either other applications or with the local operating system. But this is not possible for the files and folders that are stored within root. When you've entered the primary virtual application directory, click Next. When the sequencer displays the installation screen, our install begins automatically. We just run through the installation in the normal way, performing all of the customizations just as we would on any other machine. Place a check mark in I am finished installing and click Next. Then the sequencer will collect any of the changes that were performed as part of the installation process. On the Configure Software screen, we get to run each of the shortcuts in turn, and the idea is that we can, at this stage, perform any customizations that we need for all users. So typically you would be entering serial numbers or deselecting update options. In our case, we don't need to do anything, so I'm just going to click Close. And then Next. When the installation report is displayed, we can see any items that the sequencer thinks might have been important. So in this case, it's displaying a list of files that have been excluded from the sequence. And in this case, these are files that have been written to the temp folder. But if I needed to include those as part of my sequence, I would go into the file exclusions list and deselect this location. On the Customize screen, we either get to save the installation now, or as I'm going to do, click Customize, and we are going to head towards the sequence editor. On the Prepare for Streaming screen, once again we are invited to start our application, but this time the idea is that we will be separating the application into two blocks. Any of the files, folders and registry values that are needed to initialize the application will be moved into feature block 1, and any of the files and folders and registry values that are not needed instantly will be put into feature block 2. The idea is that if a user clicks on a shortcut, feature block 1 will be moved to the user immediately, and then as the application is actually being used, feature block 2 will be streamed to the user in the background. This process allows the application to start quicker than if the entire application needed to be present and available as soon as the user clicked on a shortcut. This process is only useful if a streaming server is being used. If the application is being delivered by SCCM or HPCA, then all of the application will be available to the user, and so this process is not needed. The idea is just to select the shortcut, run it, then the idea is to use any of the features of the software that might be used by a large number of the users. So it might be a spell checker that is within a word processor, for instance. In our case, I'm just going to close that down and then click Next. On the Target OS screen, we get to restrict which operating systems may or may not run our sequence. As a general rule, it is always best to sequence on the oldest operating system that you wish to target an application to. In this case, I'm going to allow all operating systems to use this sequence and click Next. On the Create Package screen, we get to enter a description for the application, and we either can then save the package or continue towards the editor by clicking Next. On the Package Completed screen, once again we get messages from the sequencer about files and folders that have been excluded, the fact that other applications were running as part of the pre-sequence checks, but also now we have a message that says that a C++ runtime has been detected. If I double click on that, you will see that it is not necessary to do anything in relation to this message because AppV5 now handles C++ runtimes in a invisible way, and we don't need to actually do anything in terms of installing C++ runtimes, for instance. That will all be handled invisibly by the sequencer. Clicking Close will now take us into the AppV5 editor. Where we will get to see the files and folders that have been captured as part of the sequencing process. So because we installed into the primary virtual application directory all of the files and folders that have been captured are under the root of the application. In the next video, I will run through how to edit this and to deploy it to a client.